I'm JB. This is the Back It Up Binge podcast, and I'm joined by my co-host Futures. Futures, good to see you.
Good to see you, JB. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We have a great one lined up here. We have a trifecta of a guest. We got a veteran. We got a Super Bowl winner from your New Jersey Giants. You see how I paused there? I was contemplating saying that or not. New Jersey Giants, and an accomplished and successful businessman after his NFL career. I'm talking about Phil McConkey. Phil, welcome to the program.
Thank you, guys. I gotta add to that. Second Lieutenant May McConkey's dad, and that's the thing probably at this point I'm most proud of in my life is that one and only child of mine. She graduated from the Naval Academy. Gosh, it's almost been about a year, and she's second lieutenant in the United States Marine Corps.
That's awesome. Well, thank her for her service. Thank you for your service. Appreciate it. You know, Phil, it's interesting. When I started doing research for this episode, I always knew you as the guy that ran on the field with the towel on the Giants. But I started to realize a lot of things that I didn't know about you, obviously. And one of the things I didn't realize is that you grew up in Buffalo. I was there one time. I went up there for a Dolphins-Bills game in 88, okay? 9-6 game, 15 points, 5 field goals to go all the way up to Buffalo. Interesting city. 3-pronged question to kick it off. What was it like growing up in Buffalo for you? Who was your favorite team growing up? Were you a Bills fan? And who was your favorite athlete?
Well, I never got out of there until I was 18. I never went on a plane until I was 18. That's all I knew, was Buffalo and the area and the cold and the weather. And, it was interesting. I'm a Bills fan. I grew up, massive Bills fan. It was the first love of my life. And I can remember the Bills would be playing at the San Diego Chargers, and it's a December game. And, first, second quarter, I'm looking outside and it's dark out. It's 5 o'clock in Buffalo. It's winter and it's cold and dark and gray. And I'm watching TV. I'm like 5, 6, 7 years old, and I'm watching TV, and they're showing the stand, the sun shining, and short sleeve shirts. And I go, Daddy, what is this place? Why are people there? That was my first kind of recollection of San Diego. So, I grew up in Buffalo, avid, crazy Bills fan. I still am. It's in your system. It doesn't go away. And lucky enough to get out and get over to the Naval Academy at one point.
Who was your favorite athlete growing up? Did you follow one particular player?
At that time, it's O.J. Simpson.
O.J., okay.
Jack Kemp, was the quarterback early on, one of my heroes. And then O.J. was just, my gosh, just everything as a kid growing up, and got a chance to meet him a couple times not long afterwards. And I'll give you the story if you want to hear about O.J.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We
had won the Super Bowl. It was just maybe a couple weeks or later, whatever. And we're at this party for Giants players and fans and friends. It's at a restaurant called Canistell's. At the time, it was on Central Park South. Private room, all athletes, celebrities, musicians. Somebody comes up behind me and grabs me by the back. I think it's one of my teammates, and got me in this arm around my neck. He goes, "You little MF, you got a Super Bowl ring and I don't. That's not right." Because he had read about me, dreaming about Super Bowls and him. And so that was my first encounter with one of my boyhood heroes.
That's an awesome story. Thanks for sharing that. Talk about, you wound up going to the Naval Academy. What was the journey to get there? Like, what made you decide Naval Academy?
Well, before that, grew up in Buffalo. Like I said, my dad worked 3 jobs to put me through school and, take care of us. Insisted that I go to a private Jesuit Catholic high school. Look, where I grew up, kids in my neighborhood didn't go to that school. That was all for the suburban kids and kids whose fathers were professionals and doctors and lawyers, not a street urchin like me. But my dad insisted I have it better than him. And, he killed himself, paying that tuition. And it gave me the platform to, learn and perform on the athletic fields that allowed me to get into the Naval Academy. So here I am as a senior in high school. We never lost a game my 3 years on varsity. I played offense, defense, special teams, never came off the field. And I knew my dad was tapped out. There was no money for college. So I had to get a scholarship somehow. And I was 145 pounds as a senior. And they've just limited the amount of scholarships each team can give out, like my senior year. So, I couldn't afford it. And it came down to West Point or Annapolis. Everybody thought I was too small, couldn't get a scholarship. It was West Point or Annapolis for me. And those were my choices. And I wound up choosing the Naval Academy.
Did you get accepted to both?
I did.
Oh, that's
I did.
awesome.
So I went to West Point. It was like March of my senior year in high school, I think, and it was cold and dark and gray. But I'm used to that, right? I'm from Buffalo. I think that was the first time I was ever on a plane going to New York, then driving up to West Point. And a few weeks later, I go to Annapolis and the sun's shining, and there's pretty girls running around town and the yard, and sports cars, the Corvettes, which was my dream car at the time, all around. And that's how I made my decision, based on sunshine and Corvettes.
Nice. So you have some connections throughout with this Naval Academy. You just mentioned one with your daughter, but then you have both a connection with President Jimmy Carter. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, Jimmy Carter was an alumnus of the Naval Academy, naval officer, nuclear power engineer, brilliant man. And I marched in Jimmy Carter's inaugural parade. There was at the time 36 companies at the Naval Academy. The year before, my company was Color Company, which means we were rated #1, and it's based on a number of different reasons, academics and military aptitude and bearing. So we were the Color Company, and we had the privilege of marching in Jimmy Carter's inauguration parade. So that was, I think, the winter of '76, somewhere like that. And then fast forward, my daughter was a senior at the Naval Academy, or I think she was a junior maybe, but her company was a Color Company, just like I was. And she had the honor and privilege of marching in Jimmy Carter's funeral procession. So full circle, 40 some years later, we both got to honor, one of the most famous alumni of the Naval Academy, Jimmy Carter.
Such a great connection there all around. It's incredible. So last question before I turn it over to Futures. You graduated from the academy. You have your commitment. 5 years out of the game. You're 27 years old. You're not a prototypical wide receiver with your size. Talk about your journey to get back to the NFL. And I think there's a name that a lot of Giant fans will recognize that's connected in this as well.
Well, I was a little boy. I wanted two things. I wanted to score a touchdown in the Super Bowl, and I wanted to be a pilot. And, as I mentioned just earlier, I was too small to get a scholarship, and I go to the Naval Academy. So I figured I'll get one of the dreams and I'll become a pilot. And I was doing well as a naval officer, junior officer, and enjoying the Navy and flying. And just after a few years, I just kept thinking about that other dream and didn't want to be 69 years old sitting here at home wondering, what if I had the opportunity, could I have made it and fulfilled these other dreams of mine? And I just decided that I was going to get out, give up this incredible career in the military as a naval aviator, and I'm going to go try this. And, maybe it doesn't work, but at least I'll know I tried and won't have to spend the rest of my life wondering what if. So one of the first people I sought out was Steve Belichick. Coach Belichick. He was an assistant at Navy for decades, Bill Belichick's father. I actually met Bill. I was 18. He was 23. I think I was a freshman at the Naval Academy. And I think Bill may have been an assistant with the Baltimore Colts or something at that point. But anyway, his dad, Steve Belichick, was one of the toughest, most ferocious coaches I had ever been around. Didn't realize at the time how much love he had for us, the Naval Academy, and football players and midshipmen. He was tough. If you think Bill Belichick was tough, you think Parcells was tough. All the coaches I played for, Gene Stallings with the Cardinals. I played for in Green Bay, the legendary offensive lineman Forrest Gregg, right? Tough guys, man. None of them compared to Steve Belichick. He was tough. I knew him for a long, long time. And got that opportunity. He had called Bill Parcells, who had become head coach of the Giants, and told Parcells about me. And Parcells, actually, Parcells was head coach at Air Force my senior year. We went to Colorado Springs and we beat him pretty badly. And I had a really big game, scored a few touchdowns. And so I think he remembered me from that and, allowed me to get a tryout. Tryout was, just like his first year as a head coach.
That's great.
Very nice. Phil, thank you for letting me talk with you today. And first thing I want to say is thank you for your service. And keeping in line with these football questions, what was it like walking into that locker room back in '84 for the first time?
First of all, thank you for acknowledging our great Navy and Naval Academy and military. Walking in to that locker room was, now remember, I hadn't played football in 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
I'm one of the oldest guys on the team as a first year guy. So if you think about it, the average guy comes out of college at 22 years old. If he makes it 1 year, the average life expectancy is like 3.2 years. So that means the average guy, if he makes it initially, is done at 25. I show up at 27. There were only a handful of guys older than me on the whole team, and I'm a rookie. But it was, it was a dream come true just to have the opportunity. And I remember thinking to myself, I just want an opportunity, and I'm going to give everything I have. And what I did to train to get to that point, I could have killed myself. I went as far as I could. I pushed myself to the limits, just wanting to have an opportunity again. If it worked out, that's going to be great. I'm going to realize a dream. But if it doesn't, I could at least say for the rest of my life, I tried. And going to training camp, the heat and humidity. I remember the first day of practice, my first practice as an NFL player at training camp. Back then it's like 5, 6 weeks of 2-a-days. I mean, it was brutal. And the heat and humidity. This was Bill Parcells' first day as a head coach. In the morning practice, I figured they're going to figure out I'm a fraud at some point. What's this guy that he's too old, he's too small. What's he doing here? They're going to come get me out. And again, I said, if I'm going to get out of there, they're going to get me out, they kick me out. I'm going to leave it all on the line. I went like 1,000 miles an hour every single play because I figured the next play they're going to cut me. And I was, gosh, these DBs, I'm cutting them and they're pissed off at me and they want to take me out. And after that very first practice, Parcells walked up to me and he said, son, this is going to be a long camp. You keep doing what you're doing, you're going to burn yourself out. There's going to be none left of you. You need to calm down a little bit. And, yes, sir. Yes, sir. And I didn't know any other way. And I just kept going full speed. And, my ability to catch punts is what actually made it for me. That one skill that sometimes in football, even in the NFL, could be an afterthought. You just look at the Seattle game in the playoffs. They played the 49ers, I think, and there was a punt return by the 49ers that was fumbled, and the Seahawks scored a touchdown like right after. That kind of turned the game. Again, they say an afterthought, but you got these defensive coaches like Parcells and Belichick and Romeo Crennel and Tom Coughlin that came later. Ball possession, you work your to get defense off the field. The last thing you want is that little SOB fumbling the ball. Lawrence Taylor and Carl Banks and Harry Carson and George Martin, all these guys got to come back on the field. That terrified me more than anything was fumbling the ball. I didn't care. If I had the ball tucked away securely, I don't care. You could do what you want with me. Chop my head off as long as I don't fumble. And so that ability to earn the trust of my teammates was paramount in my ability, to make the team.
Very nice. You kind of touched on it a little bit, but I'm assuming obviously the military service and playing for Navy probably prepped you a little bit better for the locker room. Was there any kind of big adjustment you had to make going into there? And while you were trying to adjust, did anybody become like a close friend on the team?
I'll tell you what about that locker room, and the reason we were world champions and the Giants had, 3 more after that was because of the leadership. And in any successful enterprise, whether it be business or sports or family, leadership is the key to everything. Great leadership. And we had it not only with the coaches, you got to remember Parcells, Belichick, and then later on, Coughlin comes at Super Bowl 50. Those three guys won 10 of all 50 Super Bowls, 20% of the Super Bowls. I like to tell that story.
Yeah.
At one point, they won 20% of all the Super Bowls at Super Bowl 50. And, the one thing that they understood and the players understood was we don't do anything without everybody buying in. We're as strong as our weakest link. And I understood that as a naval aviator. Yeah, I'm the hotshot guy sitting up in the cockpit flying this aircraft, but the second class petty officer that was responsible for the maintenance of that aircraft was as important or maybe more important than the person sitting up front. And you need to make everybody on your team feel important. And that's what we did in the Navy. In aviation, everybody in our squad, we were important because we knew how it added to the success of the mission. And when everybody's made to feel important, they try harder, they do more, not for themselves, but for those around them that make them feel included. And that's how I was. That team had incredible leadership. They made me feel like I was one of them. And the great ingredient to the success that we had was that everyone was made to feel important. I don't care if you're Phil Simms, the starting quarterback, Lawrence Taylor, maybe the greatest player ever, or a lowly punt returner, right? Everybody was made to feel important. So that's why everybody gives more of themselves for the overall effort. And, they understood that. The leadership understood it, from the coaches, to the star players.
I always liken that blueprint that you just talked to, Phil, as a spoke on a wheel. You need all the spokes there to make it turn. And that's exactly what you're talking about.
Absolutely.
Was there anybody who became a close friend right away with you, or?
There were a lot of really good friends. I mean, to this day, I didn't have a brother in real life, but through that experience, man, I got dozens of brothers. And I'll tell you what's really interesting is when we get together, sometimes it might be years, guys haven't seen each other, but you get together in a group, my gosh, it's like time had stood still. And it's the same guys getting on the same other guys for the same BS, decades later, and it's absolutely hysterical. The best part about being an NFL player, yes, Super Bowls and games and all this stuff, but being in the locker room, the camaraderie, that stuff to me was the greatest experience I had in the NFL. Again, I didn't have a brother in real life. Through that experience, I had dozens. I think of guys and I laugh. And you got to have thick skin, though, to be in an NFL locker room. Yeah, you got to be a great player. You got to, but if you don't have thick skin, oh my gosh, you're not going to last, because any open wound, they're going to shovel salt on it, and so you got to be able to handle it and be prepared. But that was the best part, man. I had so much fun, and so fortunate to be around those kind of guys. And the big names, right? We mentioned the big names, but then there's Maurice Carthen and Tony Galbraith, and my gosh, so many guys like that maybe weren't the Lawrence Taylor and Harry Carson Hall of Fame guys, but the Jerome Sallies, Brad Benson, guys like that just were the epitome of team guys, and so much inclusion on that team. I can go on and on with what Jim Burt, my goodness, just incredible players, but better people that understood we needed everybody to win, man. And that's the way it was presented in that locker room. And it was a great sanctuary. And it's a great, and I think Parcells said this once, it's a great laboratory for, human interaction and the ability to accomplish something as a group, because the sport is different than a lot of sports. Basketball, you can have one player that's hot in one game, right? And he's hitting all the threes. And baseball, you got a dominant pitcher that shuts down the other team, or one guy that's hitting a grand slam. And, all these other individual sports, but in football, man, nothing is accomplished unless 11 guys are working in complete synchronicity at all times. And then even again, we go back to the lowly punt returner. Doesn't do his job. You lose the game. So everybody's important. We understood that then. That team understood it, and uh, uh, um, my brothers, man, they my brothers for life. All those guys, and one of my great friends too is Mark Bavaro, who happens to be my daughter's godfather, and one of the toughest, most incredible teammates ever.
Very nice. I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that you guys still keep in touch and all that stuff. And that's why football is my favorite sport, because I always say the same thing. Everybody needs to buy in. Everybody needs to work together. If someone's not doing it, you're not going to win.
Absolutely.
You touched a little bit on O.J. Simpson being your childhood player. Was there any wide receiver or special teams player after you started playing that you kind of made it a point to watch or pay attention to or admired?
After I started playing,
Yeah.
yeah, there were a few. Steve Largent was a great player back in the day. James Lofton, um, gosh, I wish I could have been like him. He's 6'3" and
Yeah.
he's 200-meter champion, a sprinter. He was just so graceful. In fact, I got to play with him when I was on the Packers for 4 weeks that Super Bowl year. Got to know him well. His beautiful wife. To me, he was like one of the greatest of all time. I just sat in amazement at how he could just glide down the field. And yeah, those are guys from my era. That were just pretty impactful NFL players that I admired. And I know there's a few more. And our team, we didn't have a big star. We had no all-pro wide receivers. We had tough, gritty, resourceful, dependable, smart guys. And I just remember one, Bobby Johnson. He's a free agent, right? Rookie free agent out of Kansas. What's amazing about that team is there were two rookie free agents. It was very hard for free agents to make it in the NFL back then.
Mhm.
But we had two of them from the same school, Kansas. Elvis Patterson, the defensive back, and Bobby Johnson,
That's right.
right?
Yeah.
And one thing I remember about Bobby, I remember Parcells one time he's talking to Ron Earhart, our offensive coordinator, and Bobby made a play in practice. He goes, that Bobby Johnson, he's a football playing dude. He wasn't flashy, but man, he was good. I remember one game we're playing Denver in '86. That was the close game before we played them in the Super Bowl. And it's the game 16-16, tie game, last drive, time's running out. And we're in the 2-minute offense, the hurry up offense. And Bobby runs this in cut and he catches this ball, maybe 20, 25 yards, catches it, and he gets hit so hard, it split his helmet. I had never seen that in a game. Now
Wow.
I'm right there. I know he's dazed. And I pick him up. We got to keep going, right? We're not going to waste the time out. This is, a play or two before Raul Allegri kicked the winning field goal.
Okay.
And I had to almost pick them up and, direct him to where to go or tell him where to go to line up because he was dazed, I remember. So, yeah, tough guy, great
Wow.
player.
Wow. Oh man. While you were playing in the NFL, did you have someone that you considered the toughest cornerback or defensive back that you went up against?
Well, Darrell Green was a great competitor. A lot of man coverage. He won a lot, and I got a couple on him. In fact, the game to decide the division late in the season at RFK, I beat him on a corner route to catch one. But what I remember mostly when we played against extremely disciplined zone defenses. And I
Okay.
just remember the Rams at one point, 85-ish. Um, they were so disciplined in that zone. No matter where you ran, where you cut, there was always somebody there. It almost felt like you're running in quicksand, right? You
Okay.
couldn't find an opening because they were so disciplined. And that to me was the most frustrating thing. I'd much rather go up against man to man, right? That's mano a mano. They're going to win some, you're going to win some. Maybe you can lose them, put a fake on, but you could fake all you want in a zone defense, man. They're not moving. So, Yeah, those zone defenses, some of those teams were pretty tough to go against.
Man, that's crazy. I you know, while you're playing as well, you're talking about back in the 80s, the NFC East was really competitive, you know. Every team in there was just good. It seemed like every year. Cowboys, Redskins at the time, Eagles, Cardinals had Otis. Was there one team or one opponent in the division that seemed to elevate the team, maybe got them more pumped up to play, like a Cowboys week or something like that?
I think every game was important. And there's the one thing that I think a lot of people may not understand is, yeah, there's a lot of hype, us playing the Cowboys back then. But Tampa Bay was horrible back then, right? They were,
Yeah.
but when we were, again, one of the reasons we were world champions, when we were getting ready to play Tampa Bay, where people thought, okay, well, you're favored by 10 points, 12 points, it's going to be easier. Those were harder games to prepare for. I remember Parcells saying, I don't have to worry about my guys when we're playing the Redskins or Cowboys. I know they're going to be ready. I know they're going to be up. My job is to make sure that they're ready and up for, some teams that everybody thinks we're going to beat, because it's human nature to maybe let down or, assume different things are going to happen. Those were the games you're worried about. The
Okay.
games you're supposed to win. The other ones, man, you're ready and you're zeroed in. But I think, again, reason we were world champions and did as well as we did, it didn't matter. And Parcells always used this. If we were playing the Jersey City Destroyers, right, on a Tuesday morning at 7 a.m. On Staten Island somewhere, I don't know, our guys would be ready. And Parcells knew that his guys would be ready. His guys just wanted to know when and where. When's the game? Where is it? We'll be ready.
A champion mentality. I like that. Yeah, that's good.
So Phil, if you talk to any Giant fan, you say 1986, obviously that becomes the Super Bowl year, right? You go into that training camp, and after the training camp, you're released. You go to Green Bay, and after 4 weeks, after 4 games, you come back to the Giants. Were you surprised that you got released, and how did you wind up back on the Giants?
Yeah, I was surprised I got released because I felt like that was my best camp. Now, remember, that was my third camp or whatever, and it took time to get back some of those skills. I didn't play football for 4 or 5 years, and it takes a little time to get skills. I thought I had the best camp ever, and I was kind of stunned when I got cut. Elated the next day or that day when I got claimed by the Packers on waivers and went to Green Bay, and you know, Bart Starr and Vince Lombardi and going to Green Bay. And what's interesting is there's a statue out in front of Lambeau Field. I don't know if it's still there. It's a nondescript Packers player. It's a wide receiver catching a ball, and it's number 88. Not meant to represent anybody. So when I got in the locker room, I got assigned jersey number 88. Right. So I go to practice. And afterwards, I come in, and the local media is all around my locker, new guy in town. And they go, oh, how do you like it? I go, this place is amazing. And they're like, you just came from New York, and it was, what, the Giants winning? And I go, what are you talking about? I go, can you imagine getting cut by one team and claim on waivers the other team? And before you even arrive at the stadium, they erect a statue of you out front. And they're puzzled for a second. Then they look at my practice jersey, and they're 88, and they go, oh yeah. So I had some fun with the local Green Bay media at that point. But yeah, 4 weeks. And then after the fourth game, I got called into Forrest Gregg's office. And, coach wants to see you bring your playbook kind of thing. I go, okay, I'm getting cut. They had a guy on injured reserve. They're bringing him back. So I walk in his office. He says, hey, I got some good news for you. The Giants traded for you. Appreciate your effort. I'm going to a meeting. The phone's going to ring. It'll be Parcells. Thank you, sir. The phone rings. I pick it up, and Parcells says, hey, McConkey, those Packers drive a hard bargain. I go, what do you mean, coach? He goes, I had to throw in a couple clipboards in that blocking dummy to get you back. So he's giving me the value on the open market for my services. So
That's great. That's great.
So I go back. So I told him as soon as he said that, because he was a really tough guy, sometimes sarcastic, and he wasn't taking any grief from any of his players. And he would get on us and sometimes have this expression at the end of a statement, derogatory statement, my ass, or, sun was in your eyes, my ass, whatever. So I said, because back then there wasn't a lot of player movement, right? So I got a chance to see what it was like on the other side, and everybody thinks it's greater on the other team. And so I said, hey, Bill, the grass is greener, my ass. And he laughed so hard. He said, listen, when you get back, put it up on the chalkboard. We had a chalkboard in our middle of our locker room. And I wrote that, and it stayed up the whole season. Oh, he loved that one.
It's amazing how great coaches like Parcells, Shula, they know how to push the button and they know how to motivate their guys. I mean, that simple thing of you putting that on the chalkboard, right? Just amazing the amount of eyes that saw that and got motivated by that, or got some epiphany that, hey, let's work together here on this side. So the 86 run, you mentioned your team, always getting ready to play. But you guys dominated in the playoffs, 66-3, outscoring your opponents. Throughout that season, coming to camp, coming off the loss to the Bears and the Landetta punt, and then getting released and coming back, was it always, this is our year, we're going to go to the Super Bowl, we're going to win it? Or was it very methodical every week, one at a time, one at a time?
Well, we were always focused on, the next game. We didn't try to get ahead of ourselves. You have to do that. It's a long season. I remember Sims saying that the loss to the Bears, it was so devastating that I remember Sims saying, they showed us, we thought we were intense. We thought we were bringing it up a notch in the playoffs, and the Bears showed us, we need to get it up another notch or two. And there was this quiet kind of confidence, I think, that was built off of that game all through that off season into the next season, to where kind of understood a little bit better about what it was really going to take, to get to where we wanted to get to. So, we kind of owe the Bears a little bit for that one.
There you go.
Nice. Phil, we're going to get into Super Bowl 21 now. And I have to say thank you again for bringing home the first Super Bowl in franchise history. Me and my family are both very grateful for that. I just wanted to go through some plays through that game, and the first one I wanted to touch on was second play of the second quarter, 3rd and 3, in the Giants 40.
Yep.
And something happens on that play, and after that play, I want to mention this before you get into it, but I was rewatching the game a couple weeks ago, and Madden described you after the play as an exciting guy and an excitable guy. And
I was apoplectic after that play, let me tell you. So let me set this up. So again, we played Denver at Giant Stadium, late November, tie game, 16-16. We went and kicked the field goal, win the game. The Giants, up till then, with Parcells, defensive coach, Belichick, defensive coach, Romeo Crennel, run the ball, right? Great defense, run the ball, throw it when you have to, right? We weren't freewheeling, throwing it up and down the field. We were efficient. And the biggest game, this was one of the greatest lessons in leadership I have ever come across. Bill Parcells, in the biggest game of his life, of our lives, goes totally contra to who he is as a football coach. Totally contra. On offense, we're throwing the ball on first down, which we seldom did, faking a punt at midfield, throwing flea flickers, trick plays. This was so out of character for him. I mean, I don't think people realize the brilliance of that game plan that he allowed his coaches to put together and his players to enact, because that took what to do that in the biggest game, the biggest day of our lives. And
Absolutely.
So here we are again. It's 3rd and 3 from our 40. I'm in the slot, and Denver knows. They know I'm running 5-6 yards, going to stop, turn around. I'm going to run 5-6 yards in, out, pick up the first down, methodically going on field. That's who we were. So for this game, the playbook, we changed it up to where I'm in the slot on the right side. I'm going to go 5, 6 yards. I'm going to start to chop my feet. That's like an indicator. The turn signal on your car, right, left, right, whatever. When you start doing this and chopping down, the defensive back knows you're going to cut one way or the other. You're slowing down. He squats. He stops his back pedal a little bit and he starts to squat. Well, I run up on this guy. I start stutter stepping at about 5 yards. I'm looking right at him. I take off to the middle of the field. The two safeties vacated to cover the outside receivers. I take off, green grass, white stripes, so wide open, you can't believe it. His eyes got this big. The last second, I'm running by him. He sticks out his right leg, just catches my right foot. My right foot hits my left shin or the back of my leg, and I try to keep my balance and stumble and fall. Sims lets it go. It's going to be a 60-yard touchdown. That was one of Sims's 3 incompletions on the day. So he should have been 23 out of 25, 300 and something yards and 4 touchdowns. And I had 3 other big plays in the second half. I barely think about them, but I think about that play almost every day of my life, the one that got away, man. I'm still pissed.
Oh, man. Well, you mentioned a couple of the other plays, but we'll go into the second one. The score's 10-9 to open the half. Giants are driving. They get stalled. It's 4th and 1 at the 46. And like you said, Parcells calls that fake punt.
Yep.
And, watching it, it kind of felt like a turning point in the game. Did it feel like that to you? How did you feel?
Yeah, I think, we didn't play very well. We were over-prepared coming into that game. We're losing 10-9 at halftime. And I remember in the locker room, Parcells, he wasn't mad. He wasn't upset. He wasn't anything. He goes, "Hey, fellas, we can't do any worse than that. So let's go out and have fun." And we got looser, I think. I think we were a little uptight early on. I think we were over-prepared. We were ready. We were ready to play that game a week before. And then we just let loose in the second half. The Bavaro touchdown, and then the fake punt set up the touchdown. And then I had a punt return, 20, 25 yards. I think we kicked a field goal to go up 19-10. The next drive was the flea flicker, and the drive after that, I caught the deflection off Bavaro. So, 3 series in a row, second half. But the one that really kind of broke the game open, I think, it's 19-10, still within striking distance. But when we hit that flea flicker down to the 1, Joe Morris can score the next play. That was the game.
Yeah, that was a great play as well. Now, on that play, obviously, you came up a little bit short of that touchdown. And I remember in my house, everybody was rooting for you to get a touchdown in that game. And in the fourth quarter, that opportunity finally came. And, some Giants fans may argue it was the third trick play. Basically me. But the pass to Bavaro over the middle, it only made sense that Sims still completed that pass, only missing 3 passes in that game. Yeah. But you want to walk us through that play?
Yeah, which was unusual about that play is normally I was going in motion from one side to the other, and he would go up, and I'd cut underneath him, go across the field, and he would go upfield a little bit. And the play came in, because I was in on second down, the play came in with no movement. So I'm just in the slot on the left side, and there was no movement, and I think it was a mistake. And the ball snapped, and I'm trying to cut underneath him, but Sims throws it quickly, to Mark, and he gets sandwiched by 2 DBs, and the ball pretty much hit him in the head. And I'm running, I'm just kind of trailing him, like following him like he's my big brother. And the ball, as Madden said, I could just see, this is, ingrained in my brain. It's ultra, super, super slow motion. The ball is just tumbling down, like, one over the other. And I just snatch it a foot or 2 off the ground, and just, just delirious at that point that, just almost 30 years old, and you're dreamt about this your whole life. And there it is. And afterwards, Bavaro said, not only does he take care of his buddy, and people said, "Oh, don't you wish you had 2 touchdowns?" He goes, "Yeah." He said, "I'm just glad, he caught it."
Nice.
We converted.
Quick follow-up to that, again, as I was rewatching it. Madden was going crazy with that play, and he said you weren't going to fumble that ball after the play with how tight you were holding on to it.
Oh,
So,
I was keeping that ball. I knew it's right there. I don't
well,
think
that was the question: is it
the
do you
ball
still
right
have the
there.
ball? That's
There
Yeah.
you
awesome.
go.
That's great.
They weren't taking that away from me. I don't care what it took, man. Because I
That's
didn't know if
awesome.
I'd ever play another game, whatever, and that was a dream come true. And I was keeping that ball.
That's awesome.
I have to say one thing listening to you guys talk about the Giants 86 Super Bowl as a Dolphins fan, Phil. This is really getting me upset.
Well, one of my best friends and coworker, he's a Miami guy, so yeah, I hear it from him a lot too.
Oh my goodness.
And
Oh
I
my
tell him,
God.
I says, look, I'm a Bills fan. I got nothing. You got at least, you got 3 Super Bowls. What
Well,
are you
no
talking about?
offense, Phil, but as a Dolphins fan, I'm glad you got nothing. They deserve nothing. Sorry. I just,
Oh
I got to,
man.
as a Dolphins fan, I got to say that. Anyway, you win the Super Bowl, everybody's
Well, enjoy your
celebrating.
rebuild. Enjoy your rebuild.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Phil.
Well, I can't say anything to that. So you got me. Wow. Okay. I don't even know what to say
That was
right now.
awesome.
Josh Allen can get a couple other little buddies to
So okay,
beat up
so
on.
let me ask you a question about that, all right? Because you guys were talking, and I was smiling before, because you're talking about how football is a team game, right? 11
Yeah.
guys on offense, 11 guys on defense. You need a defense to make the offense. You need an offense to make the defense. Josh Allen could conceivably go his whole career without winning a Super Bowl, okay? And that'd be a travesty. I get it. I have to say he's one of the players I love to watch because he's great and I love his development. As a Dolphins fan, and Futures knows where I'm going with this, you have Dan Marino who never won a ring. And that's all I hear from people is he never won a ring. So I'm going to ask an
But it
NFL
doesn't
player.
take away from the greatness, right? It just doesn't at all to me.
Okay.
Dan Marino, you got to be, no. And you watch what Josh Allen does, it does not take away from the greatness. Because we're witnessing, one of the greatest players ever, like Dan Marino, all those years, man. You cannot take anything away, from Dan Marino because he didn't win a Super Bowl. Because my gosh, as great as he is, maybe the greatest of all time, you need a lot more than that. Well, he did have receivers, Clayton and Duper. Josh, name one Josh receiver other than a slot guy. So yeah, you need a lot more than that. But I just don't think you could take anything away from greatness.
Right.
Those guys
Okay.
are
So
great.
let's get back to your Super Bowl. You're running off the field, you're celebrating, and you find something. And I actually
Yeah.
watched the video of that. It's really interesting. What'd you find?
So that it's interesting that just about a month or two ago, that thing went viral, the video of that. Like it was all over everything. And I was getting inundated with questions about that, like decades later. So yeah, that they always teach you what to do to get to a Super Bowl and what you need to work for and everything. But when it's over and you win it, and then nobody teaches you what to do or how to do it. And so we're just delirious won the Super Bowl, and you don't know what to do, right? Where do you go? What do you do? You just won the Super Bowl, and I'm just kind of cheering and running around, checking my head cut off, and in this bedlam, I look down at the ground, and there's a pistol laying on the field. And it, I mean, it just you talk about something being out of place.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been playing football my whole life. Yeah, I was in the military, and yeah, I grew up around guns. My dad and his brothers were hunters, so but together, no, it just does not make any sense. So I was just kind of stunned. And good thing my military training and growing up the way I did around guns, and I safely picked up the pistol. And it's interesting as the video I was talking about, the camera at CBS that did the game, they're following Phil Simms, who was the MVP. He's walking off the field, talking about the MVP, going to Disney World, whatever. And you see me kind of woo woo running by him, like going crazy. It's still on Simms. The next shot, national TV, a minute after the game ends, there's me with my helmet in one hand and pick up the gun and I'm safely pointing at the ground. Good gun safety by me. And a security guard took it away from me. And I just kind of went on my merry way, didn't think a lot about it. And then the post-game press conference, I got a pretty big mob. I had a big game, but I think a lot of it was they were there because they want to know about the gun. And I'm not this quick or this funny normally in life, but once in a while I come up with a good line, and that was a good one I had. They asked me about it. I said, I helped my team win a Super Bowl and save some lives all in a day's work.
That's good.
Because, they said that a police officer dropped his gun while wrestling with a fan. That was the official story. That was a large pistol.
Yeah.
Maybe it was a 357 Magnum. I don't know cops that are undercover that are carrying a concealed weapon that big. They had those kind of yellow blazers that they were wearing, kind of the nondescript. So I don't know. Maybe it was a bad guy with bad intentions on the field and got spooked and dropped a gun. And hey, again, maybe I saved some lives.
It's really interesting the way you describe that, because when you watch the video, you can sort of see yourself like, wait, what is this? And then you go down and pick it up. There's a security guy there telling you to give it to him. Then you go on your way. So interesting story, though.
Bill, you talked a little bit before about playing for Bill Parcells. Is there anything else you want to add about him as a coach? And do you have any good Bill Parcells story?
Well, I think the great thing about him as a leader is his ability to understand his players, what motivated them, their mentality, where they came from, how they think. He got in our heads. He knew every guy, and more importantly, he knew how to motivate everyone. And you may think, and people talk about, I remember the old thing about Vince Lombardi, he treats us the same, all like dogs, right? Parcells' genius was his ability to understand his players and what motivated them and how to get the most out of them. Me, a Sims, a Jim Burt, he could yell at, scream at, pound us into the ground, and we're just going to respond and we're going to come back. If he did that and treated Mark Bavaro that way, it wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
Mark needed a little pat on the back and a kind word. That's all he needed. And he was, all in, a million miles an hour. And that was his genius. That was Parcells' genius, to understand what made each individual tick, how to motivate them to get the most out of them. That was his genius. More than the X's and O's. That was great, incredible leadership.
I got a great Parcells
And again,
story.
let me stop right there real quick, because one thing about leadership, you've heard a lot of definitions. And I heard one that sticks with me to this day in military and school and sports, and a Parcells. Leadership is the ability to convince others that they're capable of doing a lot more than they think they can do. And I know that was with me, like catching punts. Yeah, I was good at catching punts, but he convinced me that I can do even better. And I'm not going to drop them. And so, yeah, that great part of his genius.
Just want to share a quick Parcells story with you, Phil, because it's sort of in your wheelhouse as well. I went one time to Giants practice at Fairleigh, and on the one side field, there's Dave Meggett fielding punts. Now he's getting punts punted to him one after another. Standing literally 5 feet from him on that field every time he went to field the punt,
he was right next to him
Parcells just yapping at him.
Yeah, nonstop.
It was incredible to watch.
I could honestly say at one point in my world, I could do something better than anybody on the planet, was catch punts, right? I'm not talking about zigzagging 50 yards or touch. I'm just catching them. I used to practice, and I'd catch one-handed, put them under my arms. I'd toss two up in the air. I'd catch the punt. I'd catch the two I threw up and in the air. And it was never good enough for him. He was critique you to the nth degree, but he forced you to focus so far beyond what you thought was humanly possible, so that when you got on the field, it was easy, because he wasn't there harping at you right next to you.
Now you were saying he was great at understanding what his players needed to get motivated, and a lot of people take that as pushing buttons. There's the famous stories about Sims and all that stuff. Is there anything in particular he did to you to push your buttons, or could he push your buttons?
Oh gosh, he was doing every day. So I'll give you, it was This the season after we won the Super Bowl. So we go to training camp, right? We win the Super Bowl. I'm one of the best catching punts anywhere. And it was the second morning practice of two-a-days. Now remember, we got like a week and a half before the first preseason game. I was running a pass route late in practice in the morning, and DB inadvertently got a finger in my eye. And I go down, it's in pain. And trainer Ronnie Barnes takes me to an ophthalmologist in town. I have a scratched cornea. And, I still got my sweaty outfit on, right? They took shoulder pads off and helmet, but the rest of the pads are still on. And at the scratched cornea, they give me some medicine to put in my eye 3 times a day in a patch, right? Over my eye. Now, any other coach, any other team, you don't practice, you have no depth perception with one eye. Yeah. And you don't practice till your vision comes back, right? Not with Parcells. Ronnie Barnes and I knew we got to get back to practice. Now we're late. We stop at 7-Eleven to get just something in our stomach. I race back, go down in the locker room, get my pads on. I barely make it on time, and Parcells giving me the evil eye like I'm going to be late. I got one eye. Now I go through practice. Catching passes wasn't so bad, but now catch punts afterwards. I wasn't juggling them and catching them behind my back like I normally did because it was, tough with no depth perception. Now it's 5 o'clock. I've been in the same outfit the whole day. I'm watching my teammates come out of the locker room after their second shower, go into their second meal. I'm still in the same thing. I haven't eaten. I'm starving. I'm hot. I'm nasty. I got one eye. There's 3 punters in training camp, right? 5 guys trying to take my job. Everybody's gone except me. Parcells standing next to me. 50 yards away, there's a ball boy with the jugs machine because I would stay, just keep catching punts. Right at the end, there's one comes down to me. I catch it and it slips, and I try to double catch it and it fumbles, and I'm on the ground trying to double catch it at his feet. He yelled at me as if I just fumbled away the Super Bowl.
Oh man.
I wanted to beat but he forced me and us to focus so far beyond anything we thought was humanly possible. And that's why he got the best out of me. I'll tell you that.
Wow. Now we were talking a little bit before about Phil Simms. He has his ring. We feel like he doesn't get spoken enough about, even though he had one of the greatest Super Bowl performances. Can you talk a little bit about his leadership? And could you also take us into the huddle with the Giants?
He was flawless in that game. Nobody's ever had a better Super Bowl than Phil Simms in that game. He was a kind of a victim of the philosophy, back then, a conservative type offense. But that game was one example if you let him loose and let him do what he wanted to do. But he had the mentality of a linebacker. He was as tough as any quarterback in the history of the NFL. The abuse he took, oh my God, the shots he took, and he got back up. He's a big, strong, tough guy, but the mentality was beyond, anything that you would find almost anywhere. He was mentally incredibly tough to put up with what he put up with, especially early on, and to persevere like that. He's one of my favorites of all time. And the other thing, selfless, team-oriented, inclusive, motivating. Just an incredible leader.
How was it in the huddle during the game? Was it business-like? Did Phil take over control?
Oh yeah, it was his huddle. Yeah, you weren't saying anything. Yeah, he was in command. We knew it. He knew it. And that was his team. That was his offense. And, it was great respect for him because as an athlete, as a football player, when you see somebody, especially your quarterback, is willing to lay it on the line and do everything possible to help us win, you're gonna follow that guy anywhere.
Yeah, I was always a big fan of Phil Simms, watching him week by week. You go back to the 80s and you only had a Jets or Giants game on. So it was always the Giants for me watching it. And he was so tough. He was great. Took a lot of heat coming out of Morehead State, though, in the beginning, right? Yeah. And they never gave him a fair shot until he proved himself, and he proved it.
Well, it took a lot of pain and injuries, and it really didn't kick off and start. He got hurt in '83. So you're talking about the 5th year.
Right.
Nowadays, people don't have patience like that. You're not,
No.
if you hadn't made it by year 5, you're gone.
Yeah.
And thank goodness they had the patience with him.
So, Phil, 2 more rounds of questions. First, let's talk post NFL career. Talk about what you got involved with. I was on your website the other day. I was talking to Futures about it. It is quite impressive, those tombstones on there. Talk a little bit about post NFL career, what you got involved with.
Well, being in New York, the financial capital of the world, I got involved in finance. And that was my third career, and I dove into it and, was going to put everything I had into, that career. Involved in financial services, living on the Upper West Side of New York, worked for a few banks, and then my daughter was born. I had to get out of New York City, and I told my wife we got to get out of here. I think we're going to go to Jersey, Long Island, Connecticut, and suburbs, and we end up in La Jolla, California, other side of the country, and to raise my daughter. And then not long after, I met another Naval Academy graduate. I'm class of '79. He was '97. He was a surface warfare officer. I met him through one of his classmates who was an ex-Navy SEAL, and he was starting this disabled military veteran investment bank, which I thought was incredible, that we're going to, bring Wall Street veterans alongside military veterans to create a first-class financial services firm. And we had a lot of grit and built this thing up to over 200 people, and we hired, mentor, and train transitioning military veterans for careers in financial services while adding value to our customers. Gosh, we're almost up to 50 now, subject matter experts. A lot of them are ex-admirals and generals who have their finger on the pulse of the geostrategic risk landscape to help our customers navigate geostrategic risk. And, look no further than what's going on in Iran right now. We've got, assets that commanded the free world's interests in, the Persian Gulf and, a lot of these places. And so we help our customers navigate risk in that way. We get rewarded by putting on transactions. We continue to grow, and then we get to hire and train more military veterans. A lot of these kids are not getting an opportunity with a bulge bracket bank because they don't have a Ivy League MBA. But the young lady for 5 years was a Navy diver defusing bombs attached to ships, right? Doing some nuclear power engineer. Your life and death. You mess up a transaction or you do a bad trade, you might lose some money, but you screw up underwater defusing a bomb attached to a ship. It's life and death. And we know the value of those military veterans. And Chance Mims, my partner, the founder, CEO, had this vision coming out of the military and after being in real estate. And thank goodness that the leadership. Again, it all goes back to leadership. Here's a guy that had a vision and had an ability to lead. What's unique about him is, on Wall Street, and we talk about inside outside people. If you're an outside person, it's like me, a salesperson, running around and selling, and then you've got inside people that trade and sometimes more technical. And few people can do both. And Chance has that ability to do both, and founded the firm. And I came along shortly thereafter, and it's been a my gosh, a labor of love to be able to. What's interesting is what we do, the same as in the military. In the military and in football, it's the same thing. You put your teammate first, right? In the military, you put your Navy first, your Marine first, the Army, your teammates first come before you. And it's the same thing that we've done at Academy Securities. We put the interests of our customers, of our clients, before our own. One of service. We're in a service industry, and that's what we should be doing. And as military people, we understand that aspect of service as well as anybody, putting the interests of those that we're serving above our own. And that's been a big key to our success, as well as adding this differentiated value with our admirals and generals and subject matter experts that can help, again, our clients navigate geostrategic risk.
I got to tell you, Phil, as a former and continuing CFO who's raised money, that was a very impressive website. I was quite impressed. So fantastic. Good luck with it.
Thanks. I'm just lucky. I'm just lucky. I'm surrounded by smarter, more talented, better looking people than me. So
There you
I'm
go.
just, again, it's been a labor of love.
There you go. So last round, I'm going to fire off a couple names, call it the binge burn around. I'll take two, Futures will take two, and then I'll wrap it up with one. I'll just give you some player names. Give me a 3x5 index card, rapid fire response. We did mention his name. You did one time, but we haven't talked about him. Joe Morris.
Tough, fast, explosive, great teammate, gritty, fiery. Love that guy.
That's awesome. And I have to ask, just because it's the Giants, and then, if you don't ask about this guy, you got to ask about LT. So I'll throw LT out there.
I'm going to say something. Everybody wants me to say the obvious, ferocious, greatest defensive player, all this stuff. But I'm telling you, great teammate. Great teammate. In the locker room, he was Lawrence. He wasn't LT. LT was almost something outside, that he did. And he had this persona and this life. Inside the locker room, man, he was Lawrence. He was one of the guys, just wanted to be one of the guys. I think that was the greatest attribute of one of the greatest, if not the greatest NFL player ever, was great teammate. And when I say great teammate too, it's when you're doing for others, right? And when he went out there, man, he was a man possessed. On every play, he would leave everything he have on that field. For himself, but for us, for his team, and for his teammates. So again, great teammate, Lawrence Taylor.
You talked a little bit about him a couple times, but I want to hear more. Mark Bavaro.
Tough. Tender, compassionate, thoughtful. You've got this kind of, dichotomy of who he is, on the field versus off the field. I mean, on the field, I don't think there's anybody greater that played that position, because on one play, he's going down the seam and he's catching the ball with one hand as Ronnie Lott sticks his helmet in his ribs and he hangs on. His hands were incredible catching the ball, running routes. On the next play, he's got Reggie White, one of the greatest defensive players of all time, on roller skates as he's pushing him off the line of scrimmage and letting Joe Morris run for 5, 10, 15 yards. So tight ends today, it's one or the other. They're great receivers or great blockers. He was like the best at both. And had it not been for some of these injuries and the longevity, he'd be in the Hall of Fame, no doubt, because I think he's the greatest tight end ever.
Awesome. Otis Anderson.
Otis. So we came out of college the same year. In fact, Navy played at Miami in 1978. We were both seniors, right? Navy won 17-16. I never let him, no, he didn't never let him let that down. But so I would collect these programs from these games and I'd bring them home. I'd give them to my mother, right? My mother would have all the memorabilia, all the things. So I've got this program, 1975 Navy at Miami. Now, in 86, remember I got cut by Green Bay. I got traded back after the fourth game. And a week or two later, we trade to get Otis. Now, Otis comes from the Cardinals. And we're going through the season. What a great teammate, great player. Oh my God, love him to death. Oh, he in the locker room, what an incredibly bright light. And funny is, oh my gosh, it's all heck. So we have a couple days off, like before the playoffs start, because we had the bye week. So I go home to Buffalo for a couple nights, and I'm in my room that I grew up in, and there's all the programs there. So I picked the one from Navy Miami, 1970. We were 18 years old, Otis and I. And I'm looking at the pictures and this is now the 70s, right? Everybody had long hair. Well, except the Naval Academy, right? We had short hair, but everybody else had this long hair. And I look at the picture and there's Otis. Now, at the time, he's bald, right? This is 1986. He's got a bald head. Well, at 18 years old, he's got an afro. Not only does he have an afro, it's an afro like this. So I got this picture. So I brought the program back. I showed Parcells. Parcells gave it to our video guy, right? So our first meeting as a team, as we're getting ready for the Super Bowl or the playoffs or whatever it was, maybe for the playoffs, we have a big screen, the whole team's in there, and we're going to start. And before we break up in offense and defense, and Parcells has that picture blown up on this huge screen in front of the whole team with Otis with the afro. Guys were losing it. They're going crazy, right? They know him as a ball guy, and laughing, which was the greatest thing in the locker room, is just laughing and getting on each other. And I can hear from the back room, McConkey, I'm going to kick your ass. He knew it was me, that I'd be the only one that would have possession of that program. But love him. Then he had the second life, the second career, MVP of Super Bowl 25. Again, I can go on and on with these guys. Just great, great teammates. I was so lucky and so fortunate that they allowed me, to be their teammate and to be on their team, man. These are some of the greatest guys, and they're my brothers to this day.
Last one. Let's close it out with my favorite linebacker from that era, and that's Carl Banks.
Oh my gosh. Carl Banks, and you hear everybody talk about it. Parcells talks about it. You go back to that. Go watch the NFC Championship game against the Redskins and tell me Carl Banks is not one of the greatest outside linebackers of all time. Yes, he was overshadowed by the greatest of all time, but we had maybe number one and number two greatest linebackers of all time. And again, here's another guy, selfless, team-oriented, everything for the other guy. Just absolutely love him. Smart guy. Just, oh my gosh. He was an incredible teammate, an incredible guy. I mean, I am just, again, I got to end this with, I am so fortunate that they let me be on their team and to be their teammate. These are the greatest guys you'd ever meet.
Phil, thank you so much for joining the podcast. I got to tell you, I really enjoyed this conversation. I'm close to switching to the Giants as my team, but I really appreciate you joining. Thank you so much. This has been fantastic. The stories were great. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. My wife gets on me because I can't remember what she told me to do this morning, but I'm citing you line and verse from 40 years ago. So there you go.
Of course.
Yeah.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you, guys.
Take care.